When I was little like you, uh, my daddy come in one morning and he asked us how we'd like to take a sleigh ride. Oh, we said that'd be fine. He bundles us all up in this old bearskin robe, put on our coats and caps and our shoes, and he heated up some bricks to keep our feet warm. And we got in this sleigh, we had jingle bells. You've heard them, haven't you? We got in this old sleigh with the old horse, we called her Granny. And we rode right over the lake, right over the frozen water and snow to a little town called Grellicksville. And we messed around there a while, and it snowed so bad we went right over the fence post going home. Ready? Well, when we got back home, my mom, she had a great big pan of popcorn waiting for us. And she made us some hot cocoa. We used to call it hot cocoa then instead of hot chocolate. And my goodness, we had popcorn and apples and hot cocoa. And we just about never got warmed up. And then it just started snowing so hard. And we lived where there's a big barn. And the snow got so deep you couldn't see the back of the barn. It had a slanted roof. And couldn't even get out to the well house to get any water. We had a heck of a time, and it got way down 42 degrees below zero. And we had to get wood to keep us warm, and it was really something. And then there was an old Indian woman. Every morning she'd come by our house, and my mom was afraid of her. And she'd always want bacon and eggs and coffee and bread for breakfast. And Mom would always fix it for her because she's scared of it. And she'd stay there and Mom fixed her breakfast if she'd stayed all day. And us kids was afraid of her. Sometimes we'd go hide under the table or anywhere. And Mom was so glad when she left she didn't know what to do, but every morning she'd come. And she'd drink 2 or 3 cups of coffee. And Mom was afraid to not feed her because she might have come back and done something to us. And then another time, why, these robbers got in our house. They crawled in the window, and my mom and us 3 little kids was home by ourselves. And my daddy had to, where they made towels and bricks, and he'd had to work at night. And they got in the house, we could smell them making coffee and frying bacon and eggs. And they eat about up everything in the kitchen, and we helped our mom pull a great big old cherry dresser. You know what they are, like a dresser bedroom. Pulled it in front of the door, and my mom, she got the shotgun and put it up to the stairway, so if they had started up the stairway and could have pushed that dresser away. Mom said she didn't think she could shoot, but she said she believed she could have shot. And we just had lived in an old house. One time it was haunted. Everybody says haunted. But we wasn't afraid to live in it because you could lock the doors and put chairs up against them, and next morning, I remember this, the chairs would be pushed away from them and the doors would be open, the windows open. We'd just about freeze to death. And there wasn't nobody living in this house, but Mom said they wasn't going to chase her away, and they didn't. We just stayed there till we moved. Till my dad got transferred to another place. So I don't know what become of the old haunts. We never seen one, but we sure seen what they did. They done something. And let's see, what else?
What about the bears on the ice?
Oh, yeah. And one morning, my dad, he come home from work, and he pulled a chair over in front of the window, and he lifted me up on it, and he said he wanted me to look out there on the ice. It was a great big bear standing out on the ice on the lake, and he just floating around out there for all it was worth. Big old black bear. And we stayed and we watched him, and till pretty soon he got off the ice and got back on the bank, and then he went back in the forest. And you could hear the wildcats back in there holler. Just sound terrible. And one time it was getting dark, and my oldest Ernie had the toothache, and Mom wanted me and Ralph to go up to the drugstore to get him some toothache medicine. By golly, we did, and them old wildcats was a-hollering. It started getting dark. We was scared to death, 'cause they sound awful. I don't know whether you ever heard them or not. Did you? They sound terrible. Oh, and there's so many things up there happened. And one time we had a big old black,
I love this.
we had a big, what they called a black sandstorm. You could see it coming over the lake, just a big old black cloud. And we had a little wagon and stuff out in the yard, and it come this sandstorm and blowed it up too off the ground, the sand. You could see it coming. And we couldn't find our little wagon. We never did find it. Got buried under the sand, and we had some little shovels and stuff, and we couldn't find it. So we don't know where they got to. They got buried in the sand or blowed away. We never knowed.
Okay, what about Dillinger?
Oh yeah, he come to our house one time. It was in November, and it was real snowy and cold, and he was all wet. And way early in the morning, we just crawled out a bit. Well, we wasn't up. I wasn't. Grandpa, he was up, and that's after I was married. Heard somebody knock at the kitchen door, and I was afraid to go to the door. And 'cause that early, So that'd be your great-grandpa. No, yeah, great-grandpa. He went to the door, and there was this man. He had on an old fuzzy jacket, but it was just covered in snow. And he had an old hat pulled over his face, and he wouldn't look up so you could see his face. And I asked him what he wanted. He says, well, I want to come in, I want to wash, and I want my breakfast. And so I fixed him some water, and he washed his face. And I had one of these real soft cement sacks. I always kept it on the basement door, because when your grandpa worked in the garden a lot, and we just kept it there. Only I kept it washed every week. And I got that and told him there to wipe his hand and face on it. He said, I'm not going to wipe on that. I want a towel. About that time, I was scared. So I called your grandpa, come back in the kitchen. Now he said, I want my breakfast. I said, well, gee whiz, we haven't even made any coffee yet. You'll have to wait. Now he said, okay. He waited for the coffee, and so I fixed him. I said, do you want me to make you a sandwich to take with you or eat it? He said, I want to eat it right now. And he said, you better fix it. And we had milk, and I set it on the table and fixed him bacon and eggs. So I thought he could make himself a sandwich. And he says, you got any cereal? And I says, yes. He said he wanted a bowl of cereal. Set this cornflake box on the table, and old rascal, he ate it all and used all our milk. And by golly, then when the kids got up for their breakfast, there wasn't any milk or no cereal. And I was glad he left. You wouldn't believe it. That scared me to death. And even Grandpa was afraid of him. After I fixed while he's sitting there eating, I went in and stood at the dining room door. I thought, boy, if he come after me, I'd go in the boys' bedroom and unlock the door. And Grandpa went down the basement to fire up the furnace. I told him, you better not go down there while he was there, because you don't know what he might have done to you. Got him down there, he could have killed him, And it was scary. And then we got he wouldn't pull his cap up off his face. He washed with his head down like that and his cap pulled down. And I got a glimpse of him some way, and I said, it was that old Dillinger. Had to be him, because this looked like pictures of him.
Just broken out of jail and beaten too. That night before.
Yeah, he got out of jail.
He's a gangster.
He was an old gangster.
Bank robber? Back in the old...
All kinds of stories by him. He's really a bad guy.
He was bad.
And Tron, there's a story about Dillinger. He's stealing a bunch of these computers.
Oh, yeah. And something else was happened to when Grandma was little, just about like you. I wasn't quite as old. I guess I wasn't even quite as old as Ruth. Why, we used to have a lot of gypsies.
Oh,
We used to have a lot of them. And Mom would always say, well, if you ever heard of them gypsies coming into town, why, come in the house and crawl back in under the beds as far as we could get. Boy, I tell you, we did, and we stayed there till they got gone. And they'd come up and they'd just want to come in and they'd want everything you had in the house. They'd want flour and sugar and clothes. You wouldn't believe it. They just wanted everything. And Mom would give them all she could, and then they wasn't satisfied. And one time my daddy was working out in the country. He was drilling a well. Here come this band of them gypsies. And he says, "Have you got a watch?" Wouldn't know what time it was. My daddy says, "Well, yes, I got a watch." And this one old gypsy wanted to take a hold of it. He wanted to see it. Dad says, "No." He says, "I ain't giving it to you." Well, he says, "You better give it to me. I want to see it." Well, see, they wanted to steal the watch and get off with it. So my dad, he's a pretty brave guy. And he told him, "Now you give me that watch." And my dad said, "Well, I got to know what time it is. I can't give him my watch." And it was a good one. And they kept after him, and my dad kind of started to get afraid of him. Way out in the country, that's where he was by himself and drilling this well. And he picked up one of them big metal poles or rods, what they use, around to pound down something. I don't know what it was. And he's picked that up, and now he says, "You better get out of here." He said, "If you didn't want me to lay you down flat." And boy,
How big was your dad?
Huh?
How big was your dad?
Oh, I don't know how tall Dad was. He was about right around 6 feet tall, maybe a little taller. But he never was fat. He's kind of slender.
Really?
Yeah. My dad was pretty when he was young. He had pretty blonde hair.
You had blonde hair when you were young.
Yeah, and he had pretty blue eyes, and his hair was all wavy and fertile. And he always was real fair. And he always get these real red cheeks, He always looked cute.
Aw.
But anyhow, they were gypsies. They took off. And one time my mother, when she was little, old gypsies come along, and they had an old pet crow. They called him Jimmy Boy. And then old Mom said, "Well, I can't give that crow away. That belongs to the kids." And they said, "Well, if you don't give us that crow, we'll come back tonight and steal everything you got." Well, they would have too. So Grandma gave them the crow, and I guess Mom said they all cried and carried on because they couldn't find the crow, because the old gypsies took it. Oh, they were mean, believe me. And every time, oh yeah, that's the reason Mom always told us to get back under the bed. She'd always pull a bed spread and clean down, because they grouped, huh? Yeah, and then you know what, they were mean though. They just bolt right into your house, whether you let them or not. They'd come right in. And then one time, way back, this way, people of course, people here mistreated the Indians. You listen to my stories? Come on in, join the crowd. It was my grandma Burkett, and that was my grandpa's mother and dad. They lived up around, where was that? That's funny, I can't think of it. Up around New Madison High. And they're thick with Indians around them way back in them days, And they come there, and one night they burnt their barn down and burnt their horses and a couple cows they had, and burnt the house down to the ground. And they just barely escaped with their own lives. Boy, I tell you, that was scary. And then they moved in, I think, a little town called Savannah. And then they built them a new house and stayed there till, I guess, I don't know what happened. But it was scary back in them days, really.
Wild days.
Yeah, they were wild.
They didn't have bathrooms in the house.
And
No water in the house.
no water, no bathrooms or nothing.
You had to go outside and pump
And the
water.
houses was cold. They didn't know how to fix the houses to keep them warm. And one time we had a real bad blizzard one time. It was way, way down below zero. And the wind just seemed like to come through the house. And my mother, she took and tack comforts up to the windows to keep the cold from coming in. And we couldn't hardly keep the fire going. It was so windy, and she's afraid that the sparks would go out of the chimney and set the house on fire. She stayed up all night to watch it. It was creepy. I'm not kidding you.
It was different from what
No,
you're
it was
used to.
different.
Didn't
And
have a
you know
car,
what we had? We didn't have, we had no cars.
no TV,
No
no radio,
TVs,
no
no
lights,
No airplanes, no electricity, no electric lights,
no phone.
no yeah, we did have a
Did you have a phone?
telephone on the wall that we cranked. You seen them.
Yeah.
Old crank telephone. And,
Were you alive in Alexander Van Bell's life?
huh?
Were you alive in Alexander Van
He
Bell's
died.
I
Probably.
don't know. Grandma was born in 1901.
One.
Yeah.
And you know, I can remember the first car that us kids ever seen. We lived in Lynn, and my brother was sick, and our doctor was the first one to have a car.
Well,
And my brother Ernie, he was the one that was sick, and he just come in the room, and he says, Mommy, come here quick. He says, here goes a horseless carriage. That's what they used to call them.
Yeah.
And it was fun in a way. And you know, all the milk we got, there'd be a milkman come around to the horse pulling a milk wagon. They called it milk wagon. And it had steps at the back, and you had to take your container, maybe a little bucket or a pitcher or something, and you go out there and tell him how much milk you wanted. He had 3 or 4 milk cans in this little covered wagon like thing. You step up there and he'd measure it out. If you wanted a quart, he'd give you a quart. And if you wanted a gallon, he'd give you 4 quarts. It's really interesting.
What about, you didn't have refrigerators either, didn't you have
No,
ice boxes?
we didn't have no refrigerators, no ice boxes or nothing. And you know what we did? To keep butter and stuff from melting and running all over. Well, we'd get them big towels, I never say it right. Tiles about that high, and you'd dig a hole out in the north side of the house, and then you'd go down about that far, down under there before you set your towel up, and then you'd get rocks and put down there, and then every morning you'd pump and pump and pump till you got real cold water, and then just rinse it all down with cold water. You do that same way in the evening. Then you got next morning your milk and your butter would be cool. It wasn't very much fun back then. You have to get, when I was a little about like you, I always had to get into kindling. You know what kindling wood is. That's what we started our fire with. Little pieces of wood. And then I'd have to carry the kindling in. Sometimes I'd have to get some wood for the cook stove. And my brothers, they'd always have to carry the coal in. And this is kind of funny. Maybe you shouldn't say it. We didn't have no toilets, you know. No bathroom. Well, the boys had a little pot. And I had one. And Mom, when it started getting dark, she'd say, better hurry up. She says, it's going to get dark. Go down the back there and get your little white owls. That's what we called them. We'd go down there. I never had to bring the boys up. She'd make them bring their own. We'd bring them pots up at night. And then next morning when we got up, we always had to empty them and bring them up the house and go pump a bucket of water and clean them out. Of course, they wasn't dirty. I mean, just keep them, you know. Yeah, keep them clean. And we always had to tip them towards the sun and shine in them to keep them nice and clean so they wouldn't smell. Yeah, you wouldn't believe it back in them old days. You couldn't buy, I remember when you couldn't buy baker's bread, like bread we buy, you had to bake your bread.
Well,
Couldn't
we'd
buy.
be in trouble the way I bake bread. Doughy in the center, no sandwiches for us.
And we used to go, and you know what was neat though? Well, you used to get crackers in the store in a big cracker barrel. And he'd take his old scoop and scoop down there and get you sack full of crackers and maybe charge you 10-15 cents for a great big sack of crackers. And it was fun, and that's where you bought sugar and salt and flour way back then. It was fun in a way. And and in the winter time, you know how we kept apples? Even at the grocery they did. If you went and wanted to buy some apples, they kept them out in a week like it was dry, we called them woodsheds then. They'd always get a barrel and put straw in it and put their apples in there and cover them up with straw. And then the way back to then, you know how we kept cabbage and celery and carrots, turnips? You'd dig a big hole out in the garden. Dig a hole in the garden, and whenever they started to get too cold out, pull them up and put them down in there. And you'd take newspapers, and if you had an old coat or two you wasn't going to wear, you'd lay that over the top of the newspapers, you know, and then we'd pile dirt over it. And then when you wanted it in the winter, I seen my mom go out many times with a pick, you know what a pick is, pick that frozen dirt off of it and get cabbage and celery and apples, anything.
Onions and stuff too?
Yeah, dig great big hole, and that's where we kept it through the winter time. Let's see, I don't know anymore. Notes, I forget a lot of stuff.
Turn this off.
He had a brother, and his name was William. That was Thanksgiving Day. And that had been my great-grandma, wasn't it? Great-great-grandma. And she had run out of salt. You used to buy salt in just a little sack. They'd scoop it out. She asked him, he was a happy boy, and she asked him if he wouldn't go up the store. He had to walk about a mile and a half up the road, this old country grocery. And it was the day before Thanksgiving, that's the way it was. And you know, by golly, he disappeared and they never did find him.
Really?
They always thought gypsies picked him up.
Good.
They never did find him. And then another one of my grandpa's brothers, that was terrible in that family. One went a-hunting, he told his mom he's going to go out, and of course that'd been my great-grandma. He's going out and shoot a couple of turkeys, and somehow, because he always was very careful, they said, with his gun, and he put it over the fence, and some way or another he didn't get over far enough when he stepped on the fence, got it on the trigger or something, and blowed his head off. That was all.
That's why you have to be so careful.
You have to be so careful with a gun.
That's why
They're really dangerous.
You have Daddy take you out there and show you what to do.
You have to be so careful.
Dad taught me how to shoot BB gun. He
You
pops
have to
it
be
out
careful
while I
with any
shoot.
kind of a gun.
Yeah, you gotta be careful.
And Mom said this is true. She said she never seen it, but it was told to them, and they said it was this true story, which she said she never could believe it, but they said it was true. They said he was a little boy, he was just a doggone ornery and mean, that he just was a bad boy. And they couldn't make him behave himself or nothing. And they were out one time, but the barn was out in the country. And they heard him just a-screaming, and they said, "Oh, he's got me, he's got me."
I know that one.
And
What?
they heard him,
Sing that story.
and they said they seen him going up in the air, and they don't know what had him, they never found him.
Makes you do some thinking, don't it?
They said maybe the old devil or something got him, they didn't know. He was just bad. He just was a bad boy.
You can tell him much of this, but you also know that. I'll pop this off.
Okay.